Hello and welcome to a Firstpost POV. Israel is marking the second anniversary of the deadly October 7th Hamas attack. On this day in 2023, Hamas terrorists crossed over from Gaza and launched an attack on Israel that killed almost 1,200 innocent people, and they also took back more than 200 people as hostage. In response, Israel launched a military operation that has since then evolved into a large-scale war. Several activists as well as an independent UN commission have declared the operations to be a genocide. But looking at it 2 years from that fateful day in Israel, how has it reshaped the politics of West Asia, and what does the future look like for Israel and the region? Let me put some of these questions to Eylon Levy, who's a former Israeli government spokesperson. Thank you so much, Eylon, for speaking to us on Firstpost.
Hello, glad to join you.
Now, as we speak, there are indirect talks happening in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh between Israeli and Hamas negotiators. You've got Donald Trump in Washington getting impatient. He's asking people to move fast, and if not, there'll be massive bloodshed. The first day of the talks ended apparently on a positive note. So are you hopeful that there could be a breakthrough in the coming days?
Israelis here are hoping that the horrible living nightmare that Hamas started 2 years ago with its invasion will be coming to an end. But that depends on whether Hamas is going to come under pressure from its state sponsors, Qatar and Turkey, to free the hostages it has been starving and torturing under Gaza, to free the hostages it has been holding as insurance, and to commit to a path that will see it disarm. Israelis want this to be the last Gaza war. And we know that if this war ends with Hamas still holding its tunnels, still holding its rockets, still holding its guns, then the next war is going to be a matter of time. So there is cautious optimism in Israel that this could be coming to an end, but people are trying not to get their hopes up too high. We know who we're dealing with, a barbaric jihadist terrorist organization, and we won't believe it till we see it.
Right. Now, Hamas has agreed to two parts of Trump's proposal, which is to give up the hostages and to give up the administration to Palestinian technocrats or officials. But they have not agreed, crucially, to disarm and to also give up any future role in post-war Gaza. Are those red lines for Israel? If Hamas refuses to disarm, is there no way that Israel is going to go ahead with this deal?
Hamas's disarmament is an absolute red line for Israel, because if Hamas remains in possession of its weapons, the next war is a matter of time. The first thing it did after invading Israel and burning Israeli families alive in their homes was to threaten to do it again and again. The good thing about the Trump plan is that it separates the release of the hostages from the end of the war. It says, firstly, Hamas must free all of the hostages, even while the IDF, the Israeli army, remains in Gaza. And then Israel's withdrawal from Gaza will be linked to the dismantling of Hamas. Either Hamas dismantles itself, or Israel will have the United States backing to finish the job and dismantle Hamas's military machine. But that has got to happen one way or another. If this war ends with Hamas rebuilding military bases just meters away from people's homes in Israel, then we're going to have another war with Gaza in another year or 2 years or 5 years. Because Hamas's goal is the destruction of Israel. So this war has to end with the destruction of Hamas's terrorist army for the sake of peace.
So disarmament is an absolute red line for Israel. If that does not happen, then the deal does not go ahead. Got it. So where is the Israeli government?
Well, I'll clarify. The President Trump's plan has a mechanism that frees the hostages first,
yes,
and then links Hamas's disarmament to Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip.
Yes.
So the implementation of the plan to end the war requires Hamas to disarm, yes.
Right. So where exactly is the Israeli government then willing to put some sort of leeway in these talks? Are you willing to, for example, release more Palestinian prisoners than the deal or than the setup right now calls for? Because it seems like there will be an impasse if neither side is willing to make some sort of concessions in Egypt.
Hamas's goal is the destruction of the state of Israel. There is no way to negotiate with that or leave Hamas in possession of the weapons to invade, to rape, to murder, to burn families alive. That's non-negotiable. But Israel has been very flexible in negotiations and has offered a very high ransom to get those hostages back. They've been held in tunnels under Gaza for 2 years. Some of them still have untreated injuries from when they were abducted on October 7th. They've been forced to dig their graves for the cameras. We need to get them out. And that is why Israel is willing to release very dangerous terrorists, including terrorist masterminds with blood on their hands, from Israeli prisons in order to get those hostages out. Most countries say they don't negotiate with terrorists. They don't pay a ransom because it encourages more hostage taking. Israel is willing to take that risk in order to get the hostages back. But this war does have to end with Hamas's disarmament because Israel cannot risk another October 7th massacre. Israel cannot risk Hamas invading again and using the Gaza Strip as a launchpad to wage jihad against Israel.
Now, there is also another side to this where a lot of people say that this isn't the first ceasefire that we've seen, ceasefire proposal that we've seen. There was one in January as well, which sort of tried to freeze the conflict, which led to some hostage releases. But then it was Israel who in March walked away from that deal. So people say, how do we know that the Israelis and Prime Minister Netanyahu will hold up to his end of the bargain this time when it was they who abandoned the ceasefire deal last time?
Because this is not a deal for peace with Hamas. This is a deal for peace without Hamas. President Trump's plan tells Hamas, you have lost this war. It was a mistake to invade Israel, to take hostages, to massacre people, and to fight this war from tunnels underneath hospitals and schools inside Gaza. You have to disarm because you have lost. That is what this plan is about. The previous deals allowed Hamas to keep onto hostages as insurance, as bargaining chips, as living bargaining chips to try to survive this war. And Israel made clear this war cannot end with Hamas in power. That's why when Hamas said that there's no way it was going to relinquish power, the war was resumed and the ceasefire talks collapsed. But now Hamas is more diplomatically isolated than it has ever been. And even its supporters in the Arab world that took its side on October 7th are now telling Hamas, you have to disarm, you have to relinquish power, you have to release the hostages. There is nothing left to fight for. And I hope that Hamas heeds their warning, frees the hostages, lays down its arms, and admits defeat, because no one wants to see a resumption of the military campaign to remove Hamas by force in order to stop it invading again like it did on October 7th.
Now, you say that the January deal was bad and that it allowed Hamas basically to keep some hostages as bargaining chips. But the fact is, that was known to Israel before they agreed to this deal, and still, in March, they agreed to walk out of it. So what's the assurance that this time, 2 months down the line, Netanyahu won't say that, you know what, even this deal is a bad deal, which is apparently what he told Trump in a phone call, that it's nothing to celebrate and this is not some breakthrough. So how do we know that 2 months down the line, there won't be a repeat again?
Since the war began, when Hamas invaded on October 7th, Israel has said all it wants is to get all the hostages home and to dismantle Hamas so it can never take hostages again. Israel said after October 7th, this war can end immediately if Hamas does that. Now, this deal gets all the hostages out immediately, okay? Trump says they have to be out in 72 hours. And then it links Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip to Hamas's disarmament. If Hamas does not dismantle itself, then Israel is able to go in and dismantle it. What we need to focus on now is the pressure on Hamas to dismantle itself, not to wriggle out of the deal. The whole world is saying Hamas must disarm. Hamas is not going to be a party to any decisions in the future of the Gaza Strip. It's brought ruin on the Gaza Strip. This is a deal that requires working together with Israel and removing Hamas from the picture. And if this deal is implemented, it's all Israel wanted in the first place. Hostages home, Hamas out. It's literally all Israel has been fighting for.
What about the domestic implications of this deal? Because we remember what happened last time. The Prime Minister came under a lot of pressure from his far-right coalition partners, and some also say that's why he resumed the war. This time, do you expect this similar pushback for Netanyahu if he pushes ahead with this plan?
I think the Prime Minister really wants to end this war in the way that he promised, and that is with the hostages home and with Hamas removed from power. Israel will be going into elections next year. And I think Netanyahu's political interest is that he wants to present an image of victory, to have brought home the hostages, to have ensured the dismantling of Hamas, and not be caught in this endless cycle of war that all Israelis want to end. And this deal, therefore, provides very clear assurances from the United States that guarantee Israel's security, its interests, and make sure Hamas cannot launch another war. Because it says that Hamas has to dismantle itself under international supervision. And if that does not happen, then Israel is entitled to continue the fight against Hamas. Because the whole world recognizes now it cannot leave Hamas standing while it's threatening more October 7th massacres.
There is one clause in Trump's peace proposal that has triggered some controversy, which is it says that Israel will retain a security buffer zone or a security corridor in Gaza even after the final stages of the main military withdrawal. And it does not give a timeline for how long Israel may hold on to this security corridor. Do you fear that could be a no-go zone for Arab countries and for the future leadership in Gaza? Because this sounds a lot like a permanent occupation of parts of Gaza.
Yeah, there is consensus in Israel that in order to keep Israeli families safe, the families who were attacked on October 7th, there needs to be a buffer zone between Israel and Gaza. The Israeli villages that were attacked on October 7th are only a few hundred meters away from the Gaza Strip. The only way that those families can go home and sleep safely in their beds is if there is a buffer zone inside the Gaza Strip that is just a few hundred meters wide. That's all we're talking about. This war started when Hamas used Gaza as a launchpad to invade Israel. And it has to end with Israeli families being able to sleep safely in their homes. And I think there is an understanding across the Arab world that the number one interest is to prevent any resumption of war in the region. And in order to prevent a resumption of war, Israeli families have to be secure. They have to feel safe that terrorists are not going to invade and drag their children out of their beds in the middle of the night and abduct them into Gaza. And that requires a buffer zone that is going to be a few hundred meters wide inside the Gaza Strip.
I completely understand, and I can only begin to imagine the trauma of those families living near the border with Gaza. But do you not think it's a slippery slope when a country says that in order to ensure our security, we need to violate the sovereignty of another party and occupy, even if it's 100 meters of their territory? Do you not think it sets a bad precedent for future conflicts?
Well, Hamas-run Gaza is not a sovereign territory. Hamas-run Gaza is an enclave that
But we're talking about a Gaza that won't be run by Hamas, according to Trump's deal, a Gaza that won't be run by Hamas, but still Israel is planning to occupy 100 meters of buffer zone in that Gaza, is it not?
The first clause in the Trump plan is de-radicalization, because the plan understands that the population of the Gaza Strip who celebrated the October 7th atrocities have to be de-radicalized so that they don't want to do these attacks again. Now, if we implement that plan, if the population of Gaza is de-radicalized, turns its back on jihad, realizes October 7th was a mistake, wants to live in peace and coexistence with Israel, then I think we can imagine a world in which a buffer zone isn't necessary. But as long as the Gaza Strip is still full of terrorists with missiles and tunnels, and still full of people who believe that their life's mission is to die for the sake of Allah in order to destroy Israel, then we need buffer zone. If the Gaza Strip wants a future of peace and coexistence with Israel, maybe that won't be necessary. But as long as it's filled with people who support jihad against Israel until Israel is destroyed, then Israel needs a buffer zone so that its families can be safe. And we know that people won't be abducted into Gaza again.
Right. Now, one legacy of the conflict in the last 2 years has been the complete breakdown in ties between Israel and the European countries. Day before yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu said these European capitals are basically irrelevant in the peace process and in the post-war reconstruction or the post-war equation of Middle East or West Asia. Do you see those ties recovering after the war, if and when the war ends, or do you think this is going to be the new normal in relations between Israel and the European capitals?
It's very sad to see that by launching war on October 7th, Hamas managed to trash Israel's global reputation. We have seen enormous extremist protests on the streets of the West, calling for jihad, calling for intifada, and that has put pressure on Western leaders to essentially abandon Israel and try to pressure it to end this war. But when this war ends, I think Western leaders will understand that Israel is an indispensable ally they want on their side. When they are looking at the security threat from Russia, when they look at the security threat from Iran, and they see the amazing defensive technologies that Israel built to shoot down drones, to intercept cyber attacks, to keep its people safe, they realize that Israel is an ally that they will want on their side. And that's why we've seen Israel's defense exports booming in recent years, because European countries understand that they need Israel, that it's their ally. And so even though there is hurt feelings, and Israel is very disappointed at the way that many European countries have really been taking the side of Hamas, they understand that Israel is an ally they need in order to face their own security challenges.
Now, today, like I said, is the second anniversary of what is an unimaginable tragedy that Israel suffered. I'm also wondering about the political and security accountability in Israel for what happened, because this is a state that is famous for its exceptional intelligence and in detecting and deterring attacks by foreign groups, including terror groups on its border. Yet, what happened on October 7th can only be described as an intelligence failure as well. Do you see the Israeli government, perhaps after elections, perhaps when the war is over, make a genuine effort to bring some accountability to the people who failed on the intelligence and political side of things?
After this war, there must be a state commission of inquiry to investigate the failures. That is an important demand coming from Israeli civil society. We have to learn the lessons of how this happened to prevent it happening again. The tragedy is Israel underestimated the threat from the Gaza Strip. Israel thought that Hamas could be bought off, that it could be deterred. It didn't realize that when Hamas's leaders said they wanted to destroy Israel, they really meant it. They didn't realize while Palestinian workers were coming into Israel to work and supplies were going into the Gaza Strip, that Hamas was willing to sacrifice all of that for 24 hours of murder and rape of Israeli citizens. We underestimated our enemies. And whatever the State Commission of Inquiry concludes after this war, one of the lessons that Israel is already taking is we can't underestimate our enemies again. If people say they want to kill you and they have the weapons to kill you, then you have to neutralize that threat. And so we're going to see Israel shifting to a more assertive security posture in the region, where it doesn't tolerate threats by jihadist groups and Iranian proxy armies on its borders, and acts to remove those threats, so we never take the risk of an October 7th like happened 2 years ago ever happening again.
Finally, where do you see Prime Minister Netanyahu feature on this ladder of accountability? And I ask because he famously supported Hamas as a counterweight to the Palestinian Authority back in the day. And recently I heard some families of the hostages complain that this is a man who apologized to Qatar for the airstrike that he conducted last month, but he's never apologized for the intelligence and political mistakes that led to October 7th. When the dust settles on this war, how do you think Netanyahu's legacy will be assessed since 2023 to now?
Israel is going to have elections by November 2026, and he will have to submit himself to the Israeli people for re-election. Obviously, there is a lot of anger that October 7th happened on his watch, and he hasn't taken responsibility, but he will also try to take credit for the phenomenal achievements in this war, in the way that Hamas has been degraded, that Hezbollah has been pushed away, that the Iranian nuclear program has been destroyed. He'll put all of that to the Israeli people, and the people will have to decide.
Right. I think this week is going to be very crucial. Whatever happens, the talks are happening in Egypt as we speak. The first day of talks, like I mentioned, ended on a positive note. Let's hope that both sides agree to the consensus that was pushed by Donald Trump, and that there is a situation in which Israel is happy about its security situation and the people of Gaza can resume their normal life without any radical leadership over them. Thank you so much, Eylon Levy.
President Trump and Netanyahu announced this deal in the ballroom at the White House. Israel said yes. Hamas said yes, but now it's haggling over the details. And I hope as well that this nightmare Hamas began 2 years ago, it will finally bring to an end.
Right. Let's all hope for the best. Thank you so much, Eylon Levy, for speaking to us on Firstpost.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.